this is my best friend and chief operating officer of my non-profit, Olivia. She and I are both autistic and have grown up as women with autism. So if there's any lived experience questions, we can answer those for you. Brittney's got the research questions. With that, I will do anything you good?
Yes, I'm just making sure that wasn't me digging.
Okay, well, let's give it a hand. And welcome to Brittney.
Well, thank you all for having me. I'm excited to speak with you all today, especially during April. It's a meaningful month to be at an Autism Salon series. And yes, I'm excited to talk about the experiences of school-age autistic females. I'll preface this by saying that most of the research out there focuses on sex instead of the gender considerations. But there is a lot of ongoing dialogue about that, so we'll get into some of that here. But just wanted to say most of the research on females are those assigned female at birth, although there's a lot of interesting dialogue about other identities in the autism community. So we'll just get right to it. When I was studying to be a teacher, I think the prevalence rate for autism was about 1 in 72. It has really risen over the years. So now, per the latest CDC estimate, the prevalence rate is 1 in 31. But what's interesting is you see boys classified with autism a lot more than females. In fact, 3.4 times more common in boys than girls. And I'll get into some reasons for that in a minute. All of us in this room, or many of us, I'm assuming, know autism pretty well, but just as a quick refresh, to get diagnosed with autism, you need to show differences in social communication and restrictive, repetitive interest behaviors or activities.
Sorry, Brittney, there's an echo on the Zoom, so I just need to mute you on. I'll mute this computer.
Do I do it?
No, I think you actually have to turn that. Where's your mouse? Why is it here? That's weird.
Is it there?
Check what her mic is set on.
It's going to be on the. Oh, it's on the Zoom. Okay, so we'll just turn. Have you got the owl on?
That mic has nothing to do with it. You should turn it off.
Could you, this one?
Yeah.
Would you be able to help us on, please? Sorry.
No.
Sorry, Brittney.
I know you're good.
There was there's an echo on Zoom, so I just want to figure that out.
That happens to me a lot. So.
Yeah, everything's going through her laptop.
Okay.
Should I X out of mine?
So we need to mute this one. Is it muted? We need to maybe quit this one. Oh, jeez. I can't because I don't have a keyboard. Can you mute me?
Can I mute you? Oh, yes, I can mute you. Which one would you like me to mute? This one or this one? This one? Okay, yeah, that's muted. Is that better for everyone online?
Is that better?
Someone could just write in the chat.
Oh, it says muted now. There.
Yes, perfect.
Yay!
Because we're recording.
Oh no, I teach online, so trust me, that has happened to me multiple times. And yeah, so when you are for the DSM diagnosed with autism, it's categorized by 3 levels. When I was a teacher, I supported students across a range of levels. I'm particularly interested in those that would primarily fall with level 1, the students, the women, the females out there that require support, but because of their characteristics and masking behaviors might go years and years without the supports they need to thrive and the diagnosis. So those are the ones that's the population I'm particularly going to focus on, but I have experience across levels. I'm very interested in understanding the autistic experience for a variety of reasons. I'm in the special ed department, and part of my job is to train aspiring practitioners to support this population. And everyone that goes through our program is trained by experts to become future leaders in education and behavior. But one thing that has been overlooked a lot is the autistic population. A lot of the dialogue until relatively recently has been on what neurotypical people think is maybe best for autistic people based on the research, but little has been done for, until recently on what do autistic people want out of life. And at the end of the day, they are the experts in their own lives and their own communities. We talk about making socially valid goals a lot in education. Who knows their life better than the population itself? So a lot of my work is talking to autistic people and what they want out of life and what they feel is important. And since this talk is particular to females, I'll give some additional female considerations. So we looked at the CDC prevalence rate before. This is a population that is overlooked and underdiagnosed for a variety of reasons. So one reason for it is that autistic females may not fit the stereotype of autism. And not to gender stereotype, everybody is different, but if we were to look overall at autistic females, you might see stronger social skills. Maybe they have more of a communication repertoire. They might be more sensitive to nonverbal behavioral cues. They also might have interests like their neurotypical peers. So instead of the stereotypes that many might have about autism, autistic girls might be interested in horses, celebrities, animals, pop culture, and those interests, because they do not fit the stereotype and mirror what you might see in a neurotypical girl, they're not really on people's radar, both clinicians, teachers, etc. On top of that, autistic females tend to have high rates of co-occurring diagnoses. That includes things like anxiety, depression, but it could also include conditions like anorexia, other conditions that maybe might get more salient attention at first, and then the autism gets overlooked. Because females, like other disabilities, tend to have more internalizing behaviors, things you cannot as easily see, they tend to get written off by teachers as shy. So these are the girls in school that maybe are, they don't really have behaviors that interfere with their learning so much, but they're not really able to access instruction for a variety of reasons. They might be listed as shy, eager to please, and because they're not engaging in behaviors that are salient to the teacher, they're not as often flagged as students maybe that a teacher should be concerned about. And for multiple reasons, including these, autistic females tend to get diagnosed later in life compared to males. Another interesting thing about autistic females, so again, everybody is different, but if you're a female and you prefer female friendships, one consideration is we tend to bond a lot of the times by confiding in one another, talking about feelings, maybe complaining. We engage in activities together, but like when I'm with my friends, I like going out with like cocktails or shopping and just like catching up and talking. That has implications if you're an autistic female, because to get diagnosed, you need to show differences in social communication. When your friendships shift from playing together when you're younger to talking together, they might fall apart in adolescence, middle school. So that could be a very, very tricky time for a lot of our students. And then because of this, you're not fitting the classic profile people stereotypes of autism, like Sheldon from the Big Bang Theory, Rain Man, all of that. A lot of autistic females might not feel autistic enough to be embraced by the autism community, but they also might not feel normal enough to fit into mainstream society and culture. So it could be a tricky spot to be in. And then what I'll focus on too in a minute is females that have autism are more likely to camouflage or mask their autistic traits. So other genders do this as well, but a lot of the researchers indicate that you might more so see this in females. So what does it mean to engage in social camouflaging behaviors? There's the definition up there. It's the discrepancy between who you are inside versus the facade that you project to the world. It is a coping mechanism for being autistic in a world that maybe isn't friendly towards being neurodivergent. So what you do is you engage in a lot of behaviors to hide who you are, to present a non-autistic persona. And like I just said, you're more likely to see this with females, particularly those that have higher IQ scores and executive functioning skills. There's multiple theories as to why that might happen. One is that in order to engage in these behaviors, you're picking up that you are different. You are feeling that there's some difference between you versus everybody else. And because of that, that's what's making, that awareness is what is leading you to engage in these behaviors. Camouflaging might look different person to person. So here are some examples. So someone engaging in these might copy the behavior of someone else. So if I am at a school event and I see peers like crossing their legs and having a relaxed body posture, I'm going to copy them even if it's not comfortable for me. If I see someone talking to their friend with a certain tone of voice, I might mimic that to fit into my peer group more. Forcing eye contact is a big one. Eye contact, as I'm sure many of you are aware, can be very aversive for a lot of neurodivergent people, but you might force yourself to do it because that is what is expected when you communicate with someone. Those engaging in masking or camouflaging behaviors might also monitor their facial expressions. They might script conversations ahead of time. So if you think the conversation might dry out, you have like a bag of tricks that, oh, okay, this ended. I don't know quite what to say, but like based on my research, I'm gonna do X, Y, Z. In the past, that has worked for me. So you might have that in your toolbox should conversation dry up. And then suppressing stim. So let's say you find it very helpful to emotionally self-regulate by rocking back and forth, things like that. You might sit on your hands in school. You might maybe twirl your hair. You might do more subtle stimming behaviors. But if you do it too much, it could be at the cost of you being able to emotionally regulate. So yes, I forgot to say too, colloquially, camouflaging, you might also see the term masking. So I'm using them interchangeably in this. There are some reported pros of camouflaging, so being able to access the types of social situations you want, contact reinforcement that is of interest to you, but it comes at a great cost a lot of the times because it's exhausting. You're monitoring your own behavior, you're trying to see what everybody else is doing, and then afterwards you're processing and wondering how good of a job maybe you did. It's a lot. And for that reason, those that engage in these behaviors report increased anxiety and depression, identity loss. A lot of autistic people consider autism an important part of who they are. And if you're actively hiding that and camouflaging it, that could be hard. You might also see meltdowns and shutdowns, which are involuntary reported responses to being just flooded, your spoons being emptied. So a meltdown, that would be an external response to feeling overwhelmed. A shutdown might be you zoning out in class, going mute for a time, that sort of thing. Autistic burnout, you might get that if you engage in camouflaging behaviors. That could be very difficult because when you are more burnt out, you're more likely to feel and experience those upper two bullets, and then it's just a vicious cycle. And it's very hard to get out of burnout should you have it. Mostly what helps is tending to your autistic needs. And alarmingly, suicide ideation, big alarming statistics for autistic adults, and you see this more in those that engage in camouflaging behaviors. So a lot of the research in this space, autistic females, has been done on adult women. Since I'm a former teacher and I'm in the special ed department here, I'm very interested in how this looks in school-age youth. So I'll start by talking about what the field is showing on per the scoping review I did. Like, of the studies that have been done so far, what do autistic girls self-report their schooling to be like? And then I'll segue to a study focused specifically on masking behaviors. So in this in this scoping review, I just looked overall at the literature, and I was curious about of females that are in the general ed environment for part of the school day, just what is it like to be an autistic female in school? What are they reporting? And then for the sake of time, I'm going to focus on questions 3 and 4 here, themes related to their experiences and the relationship between what was asked versus what is self-reported by participants. And interestingly, a lot of these studies were conducted abroad. There's not a lot of literature on this within the United States. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of how I identified the studies, but these were my inclusion criteria. I was interested in research aims specific to school, and I wanted the participants and the reporter source to be from autistic people themselves. A lot of autistic people have proxy reporters, and that is valid. But like I said earlier, I'm interested in what autistic people themselves have to say because they're the experts in their communities and lives. Like I said, I'm particularly interested in inclusion. So across these 26 studies, there were some interesting themes that came up. The most common theme that emerged was bullying and exclusion. A lot of autistic girls report feeling bullied, either overtly or excluded, where maybe you're not being teased or name called, but you're picked last in a group. Nobody is inviting you to social events, and it's still very painful. So I'm going to read some quotes from some of the studies in this scoping review. So in one study, a girl reported, "I was isolated and separate in a bubble of depression and anxiety, but still felt like the center of attention with others looking at me and judging." Friendships were another thing that popped up. A lot of autistic females are interested in friendships. They might have ones formed earlier on in their schooling, but when they get older and you shift from play-based to communication-based, they fall apart. One girl said, "I do worry quite a bit when the friendship starts to deteriorate." Teacher relationships. A lot of girls talked about their teachers, both good and bad. They tended to like the teachers that they felt accepted them for who they are, that checked for understanding so they weren't left confused. But they also reported feeling invisible by teachers a lot of the time. So one girl said, "I had no personal contact with my teachers. They did not know who H really is. I felt like they looked at me stereotypically and not personally. That made me feel transparent, like air, like I was invisible. Nobody knew me for who I was." So a lot of girls report that their teachers aren't showing an interest in them as people. Maybe because they're perceived as quiet, they're getting good grades, they're compliant, they're doing what they need to do, but they're just floating through the motions and not having that really important interpersonal connection that they're looking for from their educators. Lots of learning differences, particularly with executive functioning. One girl said, "If it's just written and there is no explanation, I don't know where to start." The physical environment was discussed a lot across these studies. Girls reported school just being not the most hospitable place to be neurodivergent. So when you go to the cafeteria, there's a lot of sensory noises, there's a lot of sounds, the trays, talking, lots of smells. Going through the hallways, everyone is talking, bumping into you, lockers slamming. It's a lot, and there's a lot of pressure in schools to be social. A lot of the times it's still, if you see a kid that just wants to be alone, it's instinct to be like, "Oh, like I wonder what's wrong, are they sad, blah blah blah," and then there's this pressure to socialize, and that's a lot. That could be a lot. So for example, one girl, this was a girl in a study abroad, said, "I found the social and sensory demands of the canteen horrifying and stopped going there when I was 14 because it was easier to skip lunch than endure having nobody to sit with in the loud, smelly, bright environment." So that's pretty strong language, but that's how this girl felt being having to go to the cafeteria every day in school. Autistic identity was a big thing that came up as well. So some individuals really valued being autistic and they considered it a fundamental part of who they are. Others saw it more as a disability exclusively, and they had more mixed reactions to having it. Everybody is different. One girl said it's just something you have, like if you're blonde or brunette. It's just a difference. Camouflaging, that's a theme that came up as well. We went over that in the previous slide, copying what they're doing. And male differences in relationships. So a lot of girls talked about how their male peers that are autistic maybe got diagnosed earlier. They talked about some behavioral differences, but they also discussed how maybe they identify as being a tomboy, and because the communication style might be more direct, it's easier to form relationships with males. What this slide is getting at is how many times researchers across these 26 studies asked about each of these themes, and how much girls in qualitative interviews, for the most part, unprompted, talked about it. So for example, there might be a study that was interested in friendships with autistic girls, and she might directly answer the researcher's question, but then she might talk about other things in those transcripts beyond what the researchers asked. So the pink, those bars are indicating how much researchers directly asked about each of the themes I just went over. The purple is how much respondents unprompted talked about it. And as you can see, camouflaging was the theme where researchers aren't really asking about it, but autistic girls are talking a lot about it in those qualitative interviews. So that's one of the reasons why I then segued to explicitly study camouflaging behaviors. I'm interested in adolescent girls. I'm interested in girls that are in general education most of the school day, and I'm curious why they do it, when they do it, and their reports of how it feels. So we'll just jump right into it. So in this study, which was inspired by the scoping review I was just discussing, I wanted to know the nature, extent, and motivation for why girls camouflage that are in general ed environments alongside neurotypical peers. What are the settings, people, benefits, and costs to doing it? What school supports do they think are helpful? And then how much do their qualitative interviews align with what they self-report in closed-ended response options? And then what we did in this study, I'm really passionate in involving the autism community throughout the research process, where not just as participants, but as colleagues and researchers as well. So as this study was conceptualized, the research questions were based on what is meaningful to autistic people, based on the scoping review, based on talking with the autistic people that helped drive the research questions. The design involved both quantitative and qualitative components to it with supports. And the participants were comprised of autistic youth that self-reported their own experiences. Nobody else was making assumptions about school for them. The girls themselves were doing the talking. I interviewed their moms as well, but for the specific study, it's the girls' data. One thing that I was very proud of is we had a mixed neurotype research team in this study. So half were neurodivergent, half were neurotypical. And our research team coded the transcripts, and then we member checked all the themes with the autism community, including an autistic mother and daughter. And then we solicited autistic people on what journals might be good outlets to submit to. And then it ultimately ended up in JAD, and part of the reason for that is the first study that I remember coming across on social camouflaging was published in that journal, so it just felt very meaningful to submit there. We ended up with 31 autistic daughters and their mothers. Every single dyad was interviewed on their camouflaging behaviors, and then moms were rating on how they perceived their daughters camouflaging. One caveat to the participants is that they were mostly Caucasian and highly educated, so not going to represent the full full diversity in the autism community, but still, interesting data were uncovered nevertheless. And yes, most of the daughters were in general ed most of the school day, had co-occurring conditions. This was roughly how the design looked. So mothers completed background questionnaires about themselves and their daughters, and then every person participated in a Zoom interview with me to discuss what it was like camouflaging in middle and high school. And then for the sake of time, I won't spend a whole lot of time on this slide, but I'll leave this for you to browse. But when I designed the survey, I really tried being conscientious of the needs of my participants. So self-advocates piloted the survey with me. We removed jargon, complex phrases, identity first language was used throughout. And then we used principles of universal design to make it as accessible as possible. A lot of these interviews occurred on weekends because it's rough, like after a long day of socializing at school. So that was another interesting thing that came out. Again, I'm not going to read every single bullet. I'll leave that up to you as you browse these slides. But I was interested in how often they engage in different specific camouflaging behaviors. That's what the pink rectangle is getting at. The purple is what? School-specific areas. Where are they doing that? When are they doing that? How? And then the open-ended responses were advice they would give to school personnel, other autistic people, and anything else they'd like to share. And then we did a mix of qualitative and quantitative analyses, and then we integrated them in a joint display table. If you're interested, I can answer questions about this, but I feel like we all just want to, we'll get right to the findings. So, what I found was that autistic females report engaging in camouflaging behaviors in general ed. They're doing it most often in their general ed classes, least often at home. One girl said, "I do not mask at home." It's really wonderful in that way. As we were approaching coming back to school, I realized I was terrified of going back. I had just loved how over winter break I socialized in a meaningful way that didn't feel like I am performing for others. So what she's getting at is she's able to be her full, authentic self at home, less so at school. Amongst people, autistic females report masking most to teachers and neurotypical peers that they do not know well. They do at least to their family and any friends that are neurodivergent as well, including those that are also autistic. One girl said, "I do not mask at home. It's wonderful in that way. I am more connected to my family than with my peers." Variety of costs identified, but exhaustion is what girls report experiencing the most from camouflaging in school. Identity loss the least. One girl said from camouflaging, "I am not living up to my fullest potential and functioning." And then in terms of school supports, I was interested in what they report helping them access instruction and thrive in school best. Girls rated more adult knowledge of autism and awareness as very, very helpful, the most helpful, followed by time alone. Give me time alone to recharge and recalibrate. Those were the two supports that were rated highest. Interestingly, the ones that were rated the lowest were talking to a counselor to help process emotions and social skills classes, which I find very interesting because social skills is talked a lot. There's a time and a place for it, but the girls are reporting that they want time alone and the onus should not be on them. The adults should know how to support and validate neurodiversity. I just thought that was so interesting. One girl said, "I think it's important to know that the school system was not built for autistic people, and we were not built for the school system. It's just very challenging for us." And then additional quantitative results. Most girls are masking most or all of the school day. You're more likely to experience the costs of doing so, the more likely you do it, which makes sense. And if you're diagnosed later. A significant negative association was noted between time since diagnosis and camouflaging costs. One girl reported that she got the privilege of having always known. and by that she means always known that she was autistic. I spent a lot of time in elementary school alone, so I had a lot of time to reflect on everything. The gift of time to reflect, which I imagine, especially adults, they don't have that. So a lot of autistic females are very self-reflective. Autism means a lot to them, and them knowing that they're on the spectrum, having time to process it and know what they need and being able to advocate really goes a long way. Now we're going to get more into the qualitative, what themes came up. So autistic identity was discussed a lot amongst the 31 girls I interviewed. Similar to the scoping review, those 26 studies, a lot of girls reported mixed reactions to being autistic. One girl reported, I sat alone in the dark all night wondering why I just didn't get to just know all these things people seem to have been born with. I learned it, meaning her autism, because I had no choice. I had to first be broken down to be able to rebuild myself. So she didn't always understand why she was behaving in certain ways or experiencing certain private events. But when she got that diagnosis, it really, really was empowering. So that's what she's alluding to. Similar negative peer experiences, like those 26 studies, negative a lot of the time. Peers just being condescending, not understanding autism, not knowing how to be an ally. A lot of girls talked about how it feels to camouflage. A lot of the reports were negative. I find this quote very powerful. One girl said, I believe this was a 14-year-old too, but she compared it by saying it's not a very sharp pain, meaning what it feels like to mask. If we're thinking about when you get hurt, it's not like a shard of glass has entered my arm. It's not like my best friend told me they don't want to be friends with me anymore. It's way sort of numb and round, like a bruising sort of pain. It just sort of coats over you and you aren't very aware of day to day, like, oh my God, this is so hard. You're a bit like it's not that big, but really it's huge. So what she's getting at is it just becomes part of your normal to mask all the time, that you don't realize how burnt out and exhausted you are. But then when you reflect or you have a period in which you're not doing it, you have that realization like, oh my goodness, no, this is very hard and I'm tired and I'm burnt out. Another thing that came up is the value of having neurodivergent friends. A lot of girls report having it being really important to them to have friends that love them for who they are, that accept them, and they feel like it's easier if the friends are neurodivergent too. Not to say that you can't be neurotypical and autistic and have a solid friendship, but there's a special kindred connection, probably because you have a shared experience of having friends that love you for you and you have similar experiences. So one girl said, if I didn't have my neurodivergent friends, I don't think I would have made it through this school year. A lot of autistic girls report quality over quantity. They'd rather have one or two friends that love them for who they are, that they don't need to explain themselves, than a whole crew where it's more superficial. So that's something that I think is very interesting as well. And then if you look at the differences between the qualitative and quantitative, some interesting things came up. So I showed the graph where girls reported feeling like more adult autism awareness and time alone to recharge as the best social supports. And the interviews affirmed that. One girl said that adults should educate themselves on autism, not just at a surface level, but at a deep understanding, and also especially understanding masking. And then the second part of this quote, what she's getting at is maybe if the teacher understood what it feels like to mask those sex and gender considerations, they might feel more accepted and given the space to unmask. So a lot of girls don't want to be forced to unmask. They just want to feel like if they choose to, they would be accepted for who they are by their providers. And that space is really, really important to them. So this was an example of how the qual and quant converge together. Sometimes, though, the qual and quant did not align. So girls rated exhaustion as the greatest consequence of masking, and they rated identity loss the lowest. But what was interesting is when you talk to them in the open-ended interviews, a lot of them talked about feeling senses of identity loss. One girl said it's not conscious, meaning to engage in masking behaviors. It's a habit. It makes me wonder how much of myself I could have gotten rid of in desperation to have friends. So what she was alluding to was spending a large chunk of her school years trying to please her parents, her teachers, her friends, that she never really got the chance to reflect on who am I as a person, how does autism look like for me? And that could be a lot, because in adolescence, that is when your identity formation is happening. And yeah, it gets complicated. So that's an example of which they diverged. Sometimes the qual expanded on the quant. So girls reported that they camouflage least at home, most with neurodivergent friends. And then one girl reported that if she needs help with something, if she asks a neurotypical person to help out, it's more of a task for them and a chore. But if it's coming from another neurodivergent person, especially if they have autism too, it's a lot easier to ask because they have different struggles that I could help them with. And or we both have the same thing going on. So it's less awkward to ask if you're trying to figure out how to navigate neurotypical society. It's like, oh yeah, like I know you're really good at doing this, so in this social situation, like help me prep for it. And then maybe I can reciprocate for you and what you need support with. So you kind of capitalize on each other's strengths, and it's just not awkward, and you could joke about being on the spectrum together. So it's a bonding experience. So that's an example that helps contextualize how important having neurodivergent friends can be. And then why is this important, or why do I think it's important? Like I said, I think it's really crucial to get the lived experiences of autistic people in what we do. There are a lot of fields, including those in our department that have a history, maybe not prioritizing the needs of autistic people, maybe engaging or encouraging interventions that make it where the autistic person is forced to fit in without considering what environmental things can we do so they could thrive, and the onus not being on them. And I think that we're not going to be able to advance the field in that way unless we actually engage with the autism community. So that's what that second bullet is getting at as well. And then, alarmingly, there was a CDC estimate about 3 years ago where they reported a mental health crisis among teenage girls, with nearly 1 in 3 teenage girls in the United States considering suicide, and over 50% feeling persistently sad or hopeless. We went over how autistic adults report increased suicide ideation from camouflaging and masking. So I can only imagine how that looks with this population. But yeah, this is important. Mental health matters. So that's why I find this very interesting. And girls are out there. This is just a snapshot of headlines. When I was growing up, there wasn't really a lot of discussion about how autism looked in girls. It wasn't really talked about at all. It was seen as a male condition, I think, still for the most part. And lately, there's just been a whole wave of dialogue among late diagnosed women, the lost girls, reporting on what autism looked like for them getting diagnosed later and reporting on their childhood. So they're speaking out. They are speaking out, and they deserve to be listened to. So, yeah, it's a topic that is getting a lot of attention as well. And then, since we are in an education building, given this work on masking, given what autistic females report their schooling to be like, some additional education implications. So for academics, one thing that can be helpful based on the research thus far is incorporating student choice and interest within instructional activities. Group work is an area that can be pretty challenging for autistic youth, because if the teacher is like, oh, you all like choose your friend, get in groups, guess who gets left out a lot of the time? So if you assign groups with clear roles and responsibilities for each group member, that can make it where anyone, regardless of whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, feels comfortable and knows exactly how to participate. So little things like that can make a huge difference for neurodivergent youth. Breaking major assignments into a series of steps and teaching self-monitoring can be helpful as well. In terms of the educational workforce, be it teachers, related service providers, BCBAs, paraeducators, etc., getting autistic people to talk about their lived experiences, including sex and gender considerations, very important. For the physical school environment, I discussed this earlier, that having time alone to recharge was one of the highest rated reported social supports. So yes, if we normalize alone time in schools, that can make a huge difference. Maybe a student is not alone by choice. Maybe they just need time to self-regulate, especially if they're going to the cafeteria. They're participating in instructional activities that are biased towards extroversion. Giving students that time so their spoons could be recharged, normalizing that alone time can really, really go a long way with neurodivergent youth. As well as providing options for if they want to break from an overstimulating environment. So the library, I remember growing up, the library being a huge reprieve. That space, having a break area where you just want to be a little bit to yourself in a quiet space to recharge, can make a huge difference. And reducing visual clutter, normalizing using noise-canceling headphones, all of that. Social interactions. Normalizing and validating autistic friend groups. There's an inclination to have like mixed neurotype groups in instruction and also socially, and that's valid. There's a time and a place for that. But autistic people do report having particularly strong bonds and it being very healthy for them to have neurodivergent friends like them. So maybe it's not something we need to mess around with if that's who they want to spend their leisure time with. For students that want to make new friends, maybe there are clubs or electives, tabletop games, and RPG games can be can be a cool way for to make friends. There was a study published in the journal Autism where they found that venues like that that have like structured board games and things like that can make it easier to have social relationships if you're on the spectrum. Maybe you provide structure to unstructured periods where the bullying is more likely to occur. And yes, a lot of kids' IEP goals and behavior goals include social skills instruction, but the onus should not be just on the autistic person. Those that are not autistic should be educated as well, maybe on how to be allies, for your neurodivergent peers, better community members, and schools can incorporate anti-bullying curricula and policy. So there's others, but based on what I've seen so far, talking to autistic people, the research thus far, this is what is popping up so far. So yes, this pertains to other gender identities as well, this advice as well, but for the girls, they especially report valuing these things. So yes. I always like ending with this quote, those in disability, I'm sure you all know this quote, nothing about us without us. There is such a need for autistic people to rise up and talk about their lived experiences, especially women. You know, we're socialized to please more. Our voices haven't always been heard. So getting to know your students as people, soliciting their input and not just the adults around them, I think is the best way forward to have neuro-affirming care. So just get to know your students and talk to autistic people because they're the experts in their lives. So yes, thank you. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brittney. Do we have a mic? John, do we have a mic?
In the closet.
In the closet. We can talk loudly. Would love to take questions for Brittney, but as she said, also nothing about us without us. So we have me and also Liv. Could you come here, just in case people have real life questions for real life autistic women? Hi. Yes.
How did you recruit for your study, and why do you think there are so few studies in the U.S. That center autistic voices?
In terms of recruiting, I reached out to the ARC, which is, and their local chapters, which is a national disability organization, local groups like Autism Tennessee, USEDS, but the outlet that helped the most was Spark. It's based, I believe, at a Columbia University med school. They have a research match program, and that's how I got my national sample. I had a hard time recruiting this sample because they're underdiagnosed, and I had a very specific population. I was looking at ones that engage students that engage in masking, and of course, like, they're not diagnosed. So without Spark, I don't know if I would have gotten that study published. But yeah, they were the biggest help. And then, the second part, why our country less so? I don't quite have the answer to that. You would know more. You're from the UK. I feel like the UK is ahead of us, right, in a lot of ways.
Oh, that's actually really interesting in terms of like autism neurodiversity community. I wouldn't actually say we're being British ahead. I've also lived here 10 years, so it sounds like, I mean, what's it called, like medical databases and stuff to
that makes sense.
Get that. Obviously in the UK we have a social health care system, so there's a lot of information in one place, but I'm not I'm an astrophysicist, so I don't look at human data, so I don't know how accessible / private those things are, and Europe tends to have stronger privacy laws, so it's probably a collection of all of those things. But I do see more studies like from the States for sure.
It's classified under HIPAA, so
it's under HIPAA?
Yeah, if you talk to a therapist or if you talk to any doctor whatsoever about your autism or neurodivergence in any way, it's classified under HIPAA, so only you as an individual can share your information.
Right, so if you were going
allow
to...
them to be an anonymized voice in some study if they decide they want to do a study, but otherwise it's classified.
I got an email during your talk with a question, which I think, Liv, actually you're probably best placed to answer. The experience of autistic girls and women have so often been overlooked, misunderstood, or underrepresented in research and evaluation. So this is just them saying how useful it was to have this talk. Thank you, person. The question is, are there studies or emerging research about motherhood in autistic women, particularly autistic women with high abilities, giftedness? Liv is also an astrophysicist. She was in my class and has a son. Do you have thoughts?
I don't know about studies. Most definitely. Okay. I recently graduated with a PhD. I'm 37 years old. I was diagnosed with ADHD at 34 and was diagnosed with autism at 35. And I had my son at 30. So, had a lot of changes all at once. And one of the things I did notice when I went in for testing for ADHD specifically was after meeting me and speaking with me for, 20 minutes at the most, you absolutely know that I'm ADHD. There's no hiding it in me. And I went to a facility to have testing done, and the doctor at the end of it said, he diagnosed me with a generalized anxiety disorder, PTSD, and major depressive disorder, but not ADHD, not any of the things that actually mattered. So one, I think devastatingly, women, especially late diagnosed women, you have to jump through so many hoops to even be properly diagnosed in the first place. And then on top of it, if you have a son or a child at all, and you also happen to be neurodivergent and undiagnosed, they're going to first say, oh, well, you're just stressed because you're a mom. Or, oh, you're a woman, maybe it's hormonal. would I like there to be more studies on women and mothers for neurodivergence? Absolutely, but I don't think we're there yet.
I think there was one that was published in the journal Autism. I forget the title offhand. It was about autistic mothers that have neurotypical children, I think. I forget exactly what the title is.
I've seen a couple study recipient requests come across my desk, but I think a lot of these are kind of in process now. They're not, but they hopefully will be more.
Yeah. And
my son is also neurodivergent, so it's neurodivergent on top of neurodivergent.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's still emerging work. Yeah, it's under review, but I just submitted another paper that was on the mother's perspective, and it was interesting because a lot of moms, they in seeing their daughter get diagnosed, it led to them reflecting on, oh, I didn't think this was a weird because I do this, and it's led to a lot of introspection on who else in the family might be neurodivergent. You do see that a lot in families, and yeah.
That's the joke, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's the percentage you
It's like a crazy high percentage of hereditary.
Yeah.
Like 80% or something stupid. To have someone at least one or two generations. Right?
Yeah.
For me, it was my mom. Liv pointed that out to me. I didn't notice it.
Yeah, like the broad autism. Yeah, like the broad
my mom's
autism
autistic.
phenotype.
And
Yeah.
then Liv goes, she asked about the lights in this restaurant like 3 times during lunch, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have some questions online. Anyone else in the room? Yes, Elizabeth.
How did these, I mean, I don't know if it came up in conversation, how did these female students find their neurodivergent peers? Like, was it just naturally coalescing with one another, or did they have any, like, peer support groups, or?
We migrate to
We migrate to one another.
Yeah.
We pact with
Yeah.
our unregulated wolves.
Yeah, that I agree. It like that. You just gravitate towards people that just love you for you, and it's just easier. And yeah, I think autistic people tend to find each other.
I think that's an inherent part of it, is we tend to be very accepting, and self-aware. So the kind of behaviours in our friends who are also neurodivergent that migrate on us and vice versa aren't as grating to us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're more forgiving of those, the kinds of things that children, it's different as an adult, but as kids, I think it's like, you're more forgiving of the eccentricities. And see them as a cool thing as opposed to rocks are cool and stuff.
Yeah, one of the articles I assign in my intro class sometimes, the title is something like, I never thought others could be so happy as I am when I'm around autistic people. And yeah, I think it's because it's just easy when you have someone that just understands you.
Yeah, you don't have to think about it as much, I think.
Yeah.
Jess and I have like 7 different conversations at the same time. Every single time we'll just switch topics, and it's totally fine.
Yeah, it's totally, and talk over each other is a common one as well. But can hear also. There's some online. In these studies, this was asked during your talk, so this might have been to do with your study or another study. In these studies, were the girls diagnosed at the time they're in school? I think this is thinking about...
Both. So it was a mix. Some of them were diagnosed in their school years, but it also had adult women that were late diagnosed, reflecting on their schooling experiences.
There's also, with your study, did the girls' peers know they were autistic?
Per the girls' self-report, their friends, for the most part, knew.
Okay, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's interesting because it came up talking to the mothers, millennials onward, like it wasn't really a thing to really talk about being part of an autism culture. That just wasn't discussed as much. But now, the latest generations, they have more language and tools to self-advocate, and it's normalized more so to be neurodivergent. So I think it's easier, to find peers and allies for that reason too.
For the person who asked the question about being a mother and autistic, one of the things I forgot to mention is the reason that I was having such a hard time after I had my son was because when you are neurodivergent, especially if you're undiagnosed, all of a sudden you are incredibly overstimulated. All of the stimulation, like overstimulations that you had before, are now amplified to like an unbearable degree. You are constantly being touched, you are constantly being needed, there is constant noise, there is constant like responsibility. Your mental load goes up an increasing amount like daily. And especially if you're breastfeeding, like that's even more touch, need, no sleep whatsoever. So all the things you were dealing with before are now amplified, and you feel like you're going insane. And it's not just like, oh, you had a baby and you're having hormone changes. Like, everything is worse. That's my phone.
It's as well as though, right?
And you're as well as, yeah.
And you're never alone.
You're ever alone. So
Things touched out.
there's just a whole bunch of things you're now dealing with. And then I was also writing a dissertation.
Do you think diagnosis helps? Because I don't, like, the mothers I know who are autistic mostly got diagnosed when their kids got diagnosed, like you were saying.
Yes.
But I hope that that's, as millennials, I hope that's we're the last generation for that to happen to.
I hope so.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like, now we should, anyway.
Yeah.
Do you think knowing would have helped?
Yes.
Because you'd have known what was...
I wish I would have known while I was still at home, because this was also COVID. Because, that's actually not my phone, it might be yours.
Oh, it is as well.
We have the same ringtone because all the other ringtones bother me and we travel too much. If I had had time to process it while I was still stuck in my house, I think it would have been better. And I do think that being diagnosed definitely helped, because I finally didn't feel like I was stupid or something was devastatingly wrong with me. I understood I'm overstimulated now. There's something I can do about it. I figured out, regulation techniques and asked for help more often, because one of the things that you learn being a girl in high school is that you're not allowed to ask for help, because that makes you stand out in a bad way. If you didn't understand it and everybody else understood it, obviously something's wrong with you, right? So it gave me tools, and had my department been more understanding or understood what was going on also in like what is autism, how to help, how to regulate, I think it would have been much better. So this is definitely something that should just for K through 12, but for higher institutional learning too, especially in these super high, intense, stressful situations like a dissertation.
Yeah, there was this, I forget where it was published, but there was a study that came out on the experiences of late diagnosed women. And yeah, like a lot of the participants in that study report that, like to echo what you just said, like having it and having an explanation and a reason, like, oh, this is why I feel this way, this is why I'm experiencing this or behaving this way, was very empowering. But also, it's interesting because when you get the diagnosis, you just get the paper, and then it's like, what am I supposed to do with this paper? That's what some of the participants say. And so there's still a lot of ongoing work and conversation needed to happen on when you get diagnosed. How does that look? Because you might expect it, but you're still reevaluating and reprocessing your life. Like, oh, that happened to me early on because of blah, blah, blah. Now I get it. And that's a lot to process. So that I hear that a lot too.
It's a journey, for sure.
It's a journey.
Yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyone else? I feel like the three of us should just talk about this first. Any questions, thoughts?
I forgot to thank you too when I shared, so thank you for sharing everything. And what's next for you, your research?
Oh, I'm very interested in autistic people's advice for behavior analysts, given the field's relationship with autistic people. I'm very interested in that, and also and special ed too. But I see myself doing more work in that, going down that route. And I'm also, because I'm interested in transition, post-secondary and late diagnosed college students.
Transition's hard.
Yeah. So I would say those are some areas offhand I see myself going in. Mm-hmm.
Well, if there's no more questions, because we're running late, so to keep you all, let's thank Brittney again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you too for giving your perspective.
We can talk forever, we like to talk.
Yes.
Thank you all for coming, and next season's slated talks will happen when my spoons return, and I can cook them. For your emails. Thank you so much, Brittney.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, there will also be a recording of this, again, when the spoons coalesce.